Hi, my name is Jorge Besada, and this video is a brief overview of how the world works, or more specifically, what the market process is and its significance to mankind. It is largely based on the ideas of 1974 Nobel laureate in economics F.A. Hayek. Having a coherent understanding of how the world works is surprisingly easy. All that is needed is a basic understanding of human nature and a concept economists refer to as the market process. The market process is the natural process that creates the social order. For example, if you look down on a modern economy like the United States from high above, it looks like a human ant farm, with millions of ant-like people moving around accomplishing millions of goals in a seemingly chaotic fashion. What gives order to and coordinates the actions of the millions of American human ants? Is it George Bush, the Republicans, or the Democrats? Of course not. No one does. Although the bewildering complexity of our social order is the result of human action, it is not the result of conscious human planning or design. If 50 years ago the government hired the brightest minds to create a master plan to be completed by the year 2007, that 2007 would have been inferior to what we have today. It would have been based on ideas and technology from the 1950s. There would have been no cell phones, personal computers, and obviously no internet. The social order is constantly morphing itself as better ways of doing things arise and ripple through society's brains, leaving behind a more productive and technologically advanced social order. And although the process by which this occurs and its results are ultimately the result of human action, they are not the result of conscious human planning or design. Our social order shares this trait with language. It too is the result of human action, yet no caveman or group of them ever sat down to purposely invent or design it. Just like natural selection via biological evolution is the natural process that creates the biological orders we call living things, natural selection via the market process and its many mechanisms like money, prices, the lending and finance industry, interest rates, competition, stock markets, and many others is what creates a social order. Throughout this presentation, it is important to realize that at a fundamental level, a human ant farm does essentially one thing. It transforms useless matter into human usable wealth. For example, what really is a refrigerator? It is a transformation of matter or chemical elements like nickel and iron, which are once in the ground and have been relocated and reordered into human usable wealth in the form of a refrigerator. What about the food we eat? Food is nothing but chemicals which once stood in the ground and were reordered by nature via plants and then further transformed by the social order into the meals we eat. Before continuing with our purely economics related discussion, we need to briefly discuss a few things about human nature. The history of mankind can be divided into two stages, the sort of tribal, ape-like self-sufficient stage and the modern market process coordinated stage. The fundamental difference between the two is that the tribal environment was what economists call a zero-sum world. In a zero-sum world, the amount of wealth or resources are finite and can be seen as a pizza of a fixed size, where the more slices go to other people, the less there will be for you. Our wealth was limited to that which was naturally replenished by nature, an amount which was always more or less the same. In such a world, the only way there can be more for you is if there is less for others, and being evil and brutal really paid off. Imagine being nice and peaceful in the tribal world. At some point, due to the lack of violence and killing, the population would grow too large, and everyone would be in a constant state of famine, greatly increasing the incentives for some group to be evil and kill a bunch of people so that there would be more left for them. This would inevitably happen, and we are the descendants of such evil people because brutality is what worked in such a world and is what natural selection inadvertently selected for. This lies at the heart of understanding why we are very susceptible to being territorial, racist, violent, and many more. Of special importance is the emotion of envy. In our tribal past, if others had a lot of wealth like food, you could either go hungry, risk malnutrition of your offspring, go on a risky hunt, or look for others to gang up on those that have wealth. The instincts that natural selection has favored are to have envy motivate us to take from those that have more than us. It is a strategy that worked, and we are the descendants of such envious people. We have not just evolved to be envious of the haves. We seem to have also evolved a desire to share our surplus and be compassionate. In the tribal past, a large kill would rot, and sharing it would be a way of winning future favors when you had no luck in the hunt. The point of all this is that we are instinctively communist. We're very much for egalitarianism, for equality, for the equal distribution of wealth, because this is what worked best in the tribal world and has shaped our instincts. But our modern world is different. Once we stumbled upon farming and center our activities on trading as opposed to self-sufficiency, the market process emerged and began to shape our social order in a way that it began transforming matter into human usable wealth as opposed to just plucking whatever wealth nature slowly replenished. We began to expand the economic pie as opposed to fighting over it. Those social orders that were powered by trade and the market process grew more powerful and via conquest and emigration were naturally selected to be the most dominant we have today. Another important distinction between our tribal and modern social orders is the amount of productive knowledge that each social order can contain. It is important to realize that it is productive knowledge and know-how that guides the movements of every ant in the social order. Imagine you are looking down from above at both types of social order. If you could read the information in the brains of every self-sufficient tribal member, the information is essentially the same, and it is repeated across every brain in the social order. Everyone does essentially the same thing: wake up, hunt, gather food, fight, sleep. But in the market-oriented social order, every brain has different knowledge stored just once in each brain. The bread maker has bread-making specific knowledge, the carpenter, carpenter-specific knowledge, and so on. The knowledge is efficiently stored just once, and the total amount of productive knowledge which can lead to new technology and improvements in production is limitless. You just add more brains. The way the tribal social order works, it can only contain enough knowledge to give its human ants a very dumb and inefficient order. All it can do is live off of nature. While the market order can efficiently store a limitless amount of knowledge which inadvertently guides its human ants in ways that lead to increasingly more productive transformations of matter into human usable wealth. The market process organizes society into a large supercomputer which gets smarter and more efficient at coordinating the actions of its human ants. And the more human brains it can integrate into the social order, the more efficient a powerful a matter-to-wealth transformation entity does the social supercomputer become. This is something reality easily verifies. Today's modern human ant farm has more people than ever before, and our ability to produce more wealth is constantly increasing. It is as if both social orders can be seen as robots. One is dumb because it cannot increase its amount of knowledge, while the other gets smarter all the time, which leads to more productivity, which feeds more brains, which leads to even more productivity and even more brains, and on, in an endless cycle of improving efficiency, social growth, and prosperity. The entire human ant farm, or social order at large, can be seen as being composed of many smaller social orders which we commonly refer to as companies. Every company or mini social order is involved in a constant cycle of production, exchange, and consumption. For example, thousands of Microsoft employees coordinate their efforts to offer Microsoft's products and services to the world, which increases the world's economic pie of wealth. These goods and services are then traded for money as they are sold to the public, and the money is then traded for wealth via food, homes, cars, fuel that Microsoft employees consume and remove from the economic pie. So on the one hand, the economic pie is increased due to a company's production of wealth, and on the other, it is decreased due to the wealth a company must consume in order to maintain its productive social order. The sales revenue of a company is a measure of how much wealth it has added to the world's economic pie. For example, if Microsoft sells $40 billion worth of goods and services in a year, it has added about $40 billion worth of wealth to the economic pie. The cost of maintaining a company or social order is partly reflective of how much wealth is consumed from the economic pie. For example, if 20 of the $40 billion in revenue are used to pay for employees' wages, those 20 billion will lead to the consumption of homes, cars, energy, doctors' visits, food, and so on, which reduces the world's economic pie by $20 billion worth of wealth. The difference between how much wealth a company has added to the economic pie, in other words, its revenue, and how much wealth the company needed to consume in order to maintain its social order, its costs, is the profit, which is a measure of by how much wealth the entire economic pie has been increased. How do we know that Microsoft added about $40 billion worth of value to the economic pie? Well, because society traded $40 billion for it. If the thousands of Microsoft employees spent their time making paper airplanes, they would not have added $40 billion worth of wealth to the world, because society would not have traded $40 billion for it. The value of something is what people or society are willing to freely trade for it. The key to understanding how a social order is efficiently built is to realize that the actions of every human being are guided by knowledge. If we had a direct line to some kind of God who knew everything, he could constantly tell us what the most efficient way of doing things is, but we do not have such a direct line. How does Microsoft manage to organize thousands of people in a way that is so efficient and adds so much value to the world? How do we find the best way to order and guide the actions of millions of people in the healthcare sector or any sector? In simpler terms, how do we give an efficient order to society? How do we stumble upon knowledge and spread it through society so that people update their behavior to reflect the latest and most productive ways of doing things? One way the market process achieves this is via the interest rate. Let's say I have $1 million saved and an idea for opening an auto repair shop, which I think will cost me $1 million to operate, and will have revenues of $1.2 million for a profit of $200,000 or a 20% return on investment. I would transform $1 million worth of wealth, employees, tools, buildings, etc., into $1.2 million worth of wealth in terms of auto repair services. The expected rate of return of ideas or knowledge is a measure of how much value their subsequent social transformation adds to society. Let's say a hurricane has passed by and Mike wants to borrow my $1 million to create a tree and branch removal business that will help people clear their property of unwanted debris. Mike is certain that his services will be greatly valued by society and therefore make him a lot of money, so he offers to pay me back $1.3 million or a 30% interest on my loan. Gina also wants to borrow my million to open a coffee shop, but she expects her service to be valued less by society and her revenues to be a little above a million, so she offers to give me 5% interest on my loan. There are three ideas which will restructure our social order, and the wealth that my money buys is what will sustain and give life to such restructurings of the social order. The social order is best served if I loan my money to Mike, because society will value his product more than the other two ideas. We know that society will value it more because people will find it in their best interest to trade their money for Mike's services. And this fact reflects itself in larger revenues that Mike expects to receive, and further reflects itself in the higher interest rate that Mike is willing to offer me on my loan. By lending my money to the highest bidder, or person offering the highest interest rate, I am giving my money and therefore the means with which to restructure the social order to the brain that has the superior knowledge. So the interest rate is a mechanism that coordinates the efficient pairing of superior ideas with the money or wealth needed to allow the brains containing such ideas to restructure the social order. Ideas or knowledge can be ranked by how much they increase the economic pie, which happens to be the percentage return on investment. Let's say the average interest rate throughout society is at 5%. People whose possible ideas yield less than 5% will find it in their best interest to save their money and lend it to those who have superior ideas who borrow at 5%. The borrowers implement their ideas which might yield or increase the economic pie by, say, 20%, pay back the loans with the 5% interest, and get to keep the 15% difference. So again, you have a 20% return on investment idea. You borrow 1 million. Use the 1 million to consume wealth as you feed your employees and maintain your company or mini social order. But at the same time, you produce $1.2 million in wealth. Then you pay back the loan with 5% interest, $1,050,000, and you are left with a profit of $150,000, which reflects by how much wealth you increase the economic pie. The more abundant something is, the lower its price will tend to be. The more people save and therefore refrain from consumption, the more wealth will remain unconsumed in the economic pie, and the more money will be available for lending, which will lower the cost of borrowing or interest rate. This is a good thing because it means that more ideas will be able to feed on savings, on the saved wealth, while they transform the social order in ways that lead to even more wealth. For example, if there is very little savings and the interest rate is at 20%, then only those ideas which can yield greater than 20% will be profitable. If people save a lot so that the interest rate is at, say, 3%, then many more ideas which were unprofitable before will be profitable now. Now you can borrow at 3%, implement an idea which yields or grows the economic pie by 10%, and keep the difference of 7% as profit, which is something you wouldn't have been able to do with 20% interest rates. If you borrow at 20% and implement an idea that returns or grows the economic pie by 10%, you did not make enough to repay your debt. It is important to realize that society moves into the future thanks to its continuous restructuring into more productive states. Low savings and the high interest rates that inevitably follow slow down the rate at which new ideas can transform the social order and the entire progress of mankind. A society that saves a lot helps bring the future closer to it because its savings provide the necessary wealth needed to fund more ideas, not just the really good ones as the previous example showed. Finally, we discuss competition. Companies are just embodiments of the knowledge that guide their employees. Say Tom, who works for a car maker, learns he can make cars for half the price. He starts a company which now does things his way and is representative of superior knowledge. When other companies begin losing money due to his cheaper cars, it is just a signal to them that someone else has discovered superior car making knowledge. This forces other companies to learn how Tom runs his company and to replicate the same productive social order across their companies. If they don't, Tom's more efficient way of restructuring the social order will just continue to grow because it is fed by more money from customers. And the competitor's inefficient way of achieving social order will go out of business due to a lack of revenue on their part. So competition is really a knowledge transferring mechanism that forces every company or social order to move and act in ways that are reflective of the latest knowledge generated by the social supercomputer. The way the system works, as soon as a single brain comes up with a better way of doing things, it has every incentive of doing so because it will make more money. And this inadvertently forces all competitors to also base their ant-like behavior to reflect the best way of doing things. As prices continuously fall, new profitable ideas arise in an endless cycle of knowledge generation. For example, computers were once very expensive, but once the price of making them came down enough, people realized that every home could have them, which gave birth to our computerized world and then the internet. Due to our tribal nature and maladapted social concepts, when we think of competition, we think of the I win, you lose, brutal zero-sum tribal world. But competition in our modern market process coordinated world is not a battle that harms people. It is a battle between ideas and ways of doing things, and the winners get to guide our actions in the most productive way for our benefit. The freedom of the consumer to spend his money the way he chooses is crucial for competition to replicate superior knowledge and order across society. Every time a consumer chooses product A or product B, he is helping grow the superior social order embodied by company A, and he is removing the order-sustaining money that feeds the inferiorly ordered company B. The freedom of the consumers to choose is what plays the crucial role of selecting superior knowledge and the subsequent social orders it creates. We have talked enough about how the market process shapes the social order, and now we'll briefly discuss a few important implications. Number one is that no one invented this system. The system invented us. Just like natural selection selected the self-sustaining order we call life from a more chaotic chemical soup, natural selection continues to select. Just like it inadvertently created the process of biological evolution and genetics, which became the basis for biological life, it inadvertently created the market process, which works with our brains and their ability to store and spread social order building knowledge. And it is inadvertently building a new sort of organism, the social organism, where human beings are like stem cells, and we can grow up to learn anything needed to fit into a knowledge-guided order-building social transformation. Second is that our communist instincts are maladapted to the modern world. We evolved in a simple tribal world where human beings were responsible for planning the social order. But in our modern world, it is not people, it is the system. A system that has no visible face and does not kiss babies during elections that gives life to the social order. We instinctively believe that something as large and complex as the social order needs a gigantic government apparatus to manage it. We believe that individual freedom leads to social chaos and tribal world-like exploitation, but we are wrong. We have it backwards. It is the freedom of the individual to keep the fruits of his labor that leads to the most powerful socio-economic order humanly possible. We have evolved to believe that specific individuals and good intentions is all that matters, because that is what worked in our tribal world, and find it hard to understand that even if everyone in the public sector were incorruptible geniuses, their social order would still be one gigantic wealth and prosperity destroying blob. Individual leaders were crucial in the tribal past, but they have nothing to do with the new system, with how knowledge arises and ripples through society as it competes with other ideas and transforms our social order. Our instinctive leader worship is especially visible near election dates and in more fully blown communist countries, where there are parades about leaders like Hitler, Stalin, and Mao. For the most part, modern governments are a maladapted social growth due to our tribal instincts and inability to see how the private sector naturally grows the necessary social orders and ways with which to solve problems, without a visible human planner or manager. Again, we know the names of political leaders who do not add any wealth to the world, yet we do not know the names and persecute the CEOs who help manage real wealth production. The fact that the savings of the rich is the money that is loaned to brains with superior ideas that end up employing the have less in an efficient and prosperity building manner is just something we have not evolved to instinctively understand. When large companies employ people in third world nations, they are using their superior knowledge to give a productive order to those poorer nations. But since they are making a profit and not sharing it equally, many people and the local governments, fueled by our egalitarian instincts, see it as exploitation, making it impossible for companies to do business, so they leave, and the poorer nations remain without that which they need most, knowledge with which to order their human ants into a productive and self-sustaining social order. A fitting example is this picture taken at night showing North Korea, a government-planned and therefore communist social order, and South Korea, a pro-capitalism or individual freedom market process coordinated one. The North produces only $40 billion worth of wealth per year, while the South produces $194 billion. The North barely has a light in its capital city. Millions of its citizens go hungry every day. The South is a modern and prosperous nation. It is the system, and obviously not race or the individual characteristics of people, that lead to prosperity, because both Koreas were a single nation prior to World War II. Communist leader Kim Jong-il and the millions who work in his communist government are not evil people. They have simply been gripped by our communist instincts much harder than we have, for now that is, because we are equally human and equally susceptible to communist ideology, biologically no different than the Germans, Soviets, and Chinese. We want the government to manage society, to manage education, healthcare, to take care of the elderly, and countless other things, and we are more than glad to incarcerate anyone who does not pay taxes to fund such well-intentioned government programs. Only the market process can give an efficient order to millions of people. Since government is a monopoly, immune to the market process's social order shaping mechanism like competition and interest rate coordination, all government-created social orders or bureaucracies are misaligned and produce little wealth compared to how much they drain from the economic pie. Bottom line, how the market process works is the most important concept a civilized person needs to understand. It is the antidote to a death by government we have not evolved to understand. I would like to thank the Market-Based Management Institute and the Association of Private Enterprise Education for teaming up to create the Economics Educator contest that motivated me to create this video, and the Ludwig von Mises Institute for being such a wonderful online resource.